So let's say you have a great startup idea, but most people think you're nuts. How do you convince skeptical investors to back your crazy idea? Well, Mike Maples Jr. has some savvy advice. Don't bend over backwards to convince anyone. Your job is to find the people who get it and form a small tribe of true believers.
Once you realize that it's okay if most people don't like your idea, it's empowering in some ways because you start to say, my job is not to get everybody that I pitch to like the idea. My job is to identify the subset of people who are prepared to like it and be very clear to them. They're the only opinion that matters. Because if people are not prepared to like your idea, there's nothing you're going to say to convince them. They're not ready to move. They're not ready to join your movement.
Here's Mike's hard-won advice for the 3 essential slides that your pitch deck needs to contain.
The first slide I recommend is, explain to me what you do like I know literally nothing. The example I gave was Airbnb. We're a marketplace for unused residential housing space. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. That's VC speak. And I'm sympathetic to founders who do it because I know they get advice, say stuff that sounds appealing to VCs, right? And so they put all these buzzwords in it. Much better to say, we're Airbnb, we let you rent an extra room in your house. Because like now I know what you do. Now I may not think that's a big enough market, but now you have a chance to explain to me why it is, right? Like now I understand it well enough to engage the founder in a conversation about what they do. And then the second slide I recommend is, what's our insight, which is basically, what do we know about the future that's not obvious? And the reason that I recommend that as the second slide is I say, look, if we don't agree on this insight about the future, nothing else I'm about to say is going to make sense to you. But if the person's prepared to agree with your insight, now all of a sudden, whenever they bring up a competitor, you return back to the insight. Now I can understand why you think that's a competitor, but keep in mind, this is our insight. Our competitor does X, we do Y. The competitor sells apples, we sell bananas, right? And that's because our insight is we're the only guy selling bananas. You return back to your insight to counter any objection. And then the third is just, what proof points, if any, do you have? Traction, momentum, founders, anything good that you can say that's objective about it. Usually I find if you can do those 3 things in the first 10 minutes, the people who are prepared to believe will be leaning forward.
The great thing about Mike's approach is it puts you in a position of power. Instead of begging skeptics to like your idea, you're auditioning investors to find the true believers that you want to work with. Oh, and one more piece of advice from Mike. Don't create a Franken Deck.
And if they don't like it, the solution is not necessarily to say, oh, now they're saying that I should have a slide on trends for millennials in housing. Next thing you know, you got 5 slides before you say what you do. Millennials, trends in housing. And usually that happens because well-intentioned people giving advice convince the founder to create a Franken Deck. And before you know it, it's 30 slides trying to anticipate every possible objection and incorporate every piece of feedback. And now the person who was prepared to believe what you believe doesn't understand what you do. And so we missed our opportunity to convince an early believer to believe because we burdened them with a Franken Deck with a bunch of noise in it rather than the signal of what our insight was.
Keep in mind that Mike is a seed investor, which means that it's his job to spot those high-risk, high-reward opportunities that most people would dismiss as too crazy. Most good business ideas are more straightforward and easier to understand. But if your idea has the potential to be the next big thing, then Mike's advice is gold. To get your free pitch deck cheat sheet, go to gamethinking.io/pitch. For more great startup advice from Mike Maples, watch this video next. See you soon.